Okay, the last session of the day, the last session for our business track is called IP versus MSTP, the great debate. So, as in any debate, political or otherwise, I have control over their microphones. So no, your mic is cut off, Paul.
I just got a quick question.
Sure.
If we're saying IP, why aren't we saying serial versus IP? Because MSTP specific.
Freaking Paul starting already, guys. So we know, look, we know where this is going, right? we know where this is going. That's why we've got Paul on the panel. So listen, what I'm going to do, I'm going to start and this is going to be a really conversational debate. So you don't have to wait till the end of the session to ask questions. So if you have a question, raise your hand. I'll get a mic ran to you and you can ask questions. Like I said, this is going to be a debate over serial versus IP, right? Serial as in S-E-R, not C-E. Paul. So let's get this thing started. Let's start from the far left and introduce yourself, where you work, what you guys do, what your company does. Starting with you, Mitch.
Mitch Reed, I'm with Conti Corporation, building automation controls. We're a controls contractor. We specialize in data management on serial when we have to, and properly treating IP when we get to.
Russ, Holton, Bedrock. We are a real estate developer here in Detroit. This is one of our properties. The Hudson Tower across the street is one of our properties. We have currently 71 integrated properties between Detroit and Cleveland. That is our show. I run the smart building strategy for them.
Paul Maximuk, Newcomb and Boyd, consulting engineering firm based out of Atlanta. Mike and I have been in a couple of these panels. We're in this area. We like to talk about things and where the future is headed.
I am Sid Blomberg, K&S Ventures Incorporated. We're a control contractor, and also we kind of specialize in large-scale MSI stuff.
I'm Bobbie Tincher with the University of Kentucky, and I'm a utility systems manager that do all the systems integration for the university.
And I'm Jeff Czarniecki, Director of Building Automation and Controls for Peter Basso Associates. We're an MEP contractor or consultant. And as Ed said the last meeting, I just know enough to be dangerous, but we get involved with 4 major market sectors, corporate and government, working with Russ, healthcare and lab, K through 12, higher ed. So we got a very diverse project portfolio.
So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to toss out a softball question to start things off. And I want each one of you to answer in your own way. What's the fundamental differences, technically, right, between MSTP or serial and IP devices that owners and operators should understand? Let's start with you, Mitch.
I think the fundamental difference is cost impact for owners, both sides, right? So historically, MSTP controllers are cheaper for implementation, which in theory saves you money, right? I think on the back end service, IP is a lot cleaner. IP integration into OT, IT for owners. There's a lot of advantageous things to that. But then we get into the discussion of, do you have the IT infrastructure to support the OT onboarding, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a bit of both. I think both work in their little in their individual use case applications, but ultimately as a whole, this industry is pushing towards IT/OT. IP is obviously the way to go from a management perspective, speed perspective, non-latency, data integrity. There's a lot of things, a lot of technical things that go into that, but ultimately I think IP is the way to go.
How about you, Russ?
Yeah,
the fundamental differences.
Being on the owner's side, so we have both systems at Bedrock. So we have like the Hudson's Tower as a prime example. That is BACnet IP, but it also is BACnet MSTP. We're doing IP through our network switches. We're doing MSTP through KMC routers, right? And they each have their specific purpose. It made no sense to put small BACnet stats as IP-based, so we ran MSTP buses for that. But all the plant controllers, major system controllers are all IP. There is a cost impact on IP versus MSTP initially, But as we have found, it's a more robust system. It's easier for my team to troubleshoot, so I could actually send an IT tech out and they can ping the IP addresses and find out where fault is. Where the MSTP buses, when we have issues with those, it can be a day, 2 days, 3 days that my team's online. You know, they're putting little bugs on there to try to find out where the MSTP network's having a problem. So from an operational standpoint, I used to be all MSTP. Now I prefer IP. It's just where my mind sits now.
So Paul, same question. What are the key technical differences between MSTP and IP? We're not starting to debate yet, guys.
Not yet.
But let's just go. Yeah.
I just say that the technical differences are the IP systems align more with the IT support models. You have visibility into every asset connected to that network. When you're a sub network, a serial connection off a IP router, whatever, the chances are less data is available. It depends on how it's configured. Also, the capabilities and horsepower of the IP controllers they respond much faster. They network traffic's a lot easier to manage. There are just so many different things that you can do in an IP versus MSTP.
Okay. Sid, fundamental differences?
Well, I think we've heard just about all of them. I mean, speed is the biggest. Obviously, when you're on that IP network, you got much bigger bandwidth. Serial's comfortable. It's stuff we've done for years and years, 30 years we've done it, so it's comfortable. And, you know, even myself reflecting on like this week, I've looked at like, why haven't I pushed my group into being total serial? And it's the comfort level of my installed techs and the comfort level of the pricing and all that other stuff there that's probably held us back more than anything else. But also reflecting, it seems like whenever we're doing something big, we're always talking about getting it on the IP network, so we got that bandwidth to get the job done.
Right. Bobbie?
So for us at the University of Kentucky, there is the reliability piece as well. We do not in facilities manage our own IT network, so we do not have control over it. And we have not implemented an OT network, so we have no control over that. So the reliability and the cybersecurity, as well as the speed and of the data, I guess, are big differences, and the cost is huge to us.
How about you, Jeff?
Well,
as you understand it, yeah.
Yeah, as I was saying, we were diverse in our project sizes and whatnot, and we work with some big projects where we're trying to leverage the IP infrastructure for those types of projects. But then we deal with a lot of smaller projects where, you know, there's not a lot of IT backing, department backing to support that. And so from a simplistic standpoint, the MST products are easier for the control contractors to install. There's many more control contractors that understand that technology, and you get more competitive bidding that way. One of our one of the big things we're promoting with a lot of our projects, construction managers demand it. They want the competitive pricing. So so we're looking for open protocol systems, but we always throw the open distribution tag on that because a lot of controls companies have BACnet, but we're trying to create a network that combines all the technologies that other people can service it once an owner is tired of working with somebody else.
Yeah. So that kind of segues to my next question, because you mentioned certain type of customers. Mitch, is there a particular vertical market or certain type of customer that you recommend IP opposed to MSTP, or vice versa?
That's an interesting question. I think it's owner dependent, not vertical dependent.
Okay. Yeah.
To be honest with you.
Take it from that perspective.
To Bobbie's point, right? So, the owner has to have buy-in, right? Mm-hmm. Myself as a contractor, or anybody up here, trying to nudge, or Scott, you know how it is. You're trying to nudge the industry in a certain direction. You get a certain amount of pushback because A, people don't understand it, and B, there's a lack of wanting to intermingle the IT, OT, or creating an OT network. In my experience, it's just explaining it to the customer, and hey, this is not difficult, right? We throw in a couple VLANs, we segment it, you're good to go. It's all software, get on the network, whatever the case may be. Once you have those discussions, people tend to open up a little bit more to it, but then it's naturally, my IT department doesn't want to support that. So are you as Conti going to support this long term? Sure, we can, but that's not the goal here. The goal is to make the owner self-sufficient, right? So really, it's the educational piece, and it's being, it's really owner dependent. I mean, again, going back to Bedrock, these guys put a procedure in place prior to the switch, right?
Right.
From serial to IP, and trying to move that ship as a third party with an established firm, it's really tough to do. So it's owner dependent. I don't know if there's a specific vertical that's more apt to it. I would assume real estate. But that's a huge assumption.
Paul, how about you guys? Because you guys are consulting engineers. So are there specific project types that you recommend IP versus MSTP or vice versa?
Definitely. Data center work, IP. That's a no-brainer, but we still see serial devices spec'd in what they have, and it makes no sense anymore, right? Other thing, we do a lot of life science research labs. Again, quick responding to pressurization, healthcare facilities, same thing, right? When you get into pressurization control and so forth, the response time and seeing what's going on in the data acquisition and number of data points that you're actually seeing over a period of time. I mean, we're all old school, a lot of us originally, and when we were collecting data, it was very simple, 15-minute interval.
Right.
That doesn't work anymore, right?
Right.
We're looking at real time, so change of value, or if we're, Sid and I had a conversation getting that metering data, we might be 1, 2, 3 seconds aggregating data, and you're not gonna do that on serial.
Right. Yeah. How about you guys, Sid? Do you recommend MSTP totally, or does it fluctuate between customers? From customer to customer, I'm sorry.
Maybe customers and projects. So, we're getting into some big footprint projects that have, very little equipment in it. So, like a Amazon warehouse, for example, right? So, in that case, we're looking at these long runs of MSTP that wouldn't be reliable, and we're pushing that customer to IP in this case, right? Because they have the infrastructure already in place. We're not going to break any 350 feet rules. We're going to be able to land on their infrastructure and make it happen. So we kind of look at it at a customer basis and the amount of data that we're going to be pulling out of a piece of equipment. So a chiller room, a boiler room, a CUC, something like that that's got thousands and thousands of points, we're going to push towards IP. But sadly, like in the VAV market, we've been sticking with MSTP. So, again, we're always trying to learn and having these opportunities to come and talk. I've told my people we're doing a project here soon to relive what we did 5-6 years ago. So, we're always trying to learn from that.
Yeah. Jeff, how about you guys?
Personally,
Because you guys are designers, right?
Exactly. So, a lot of the decision making depends on the owner's understanding of the IP network versus MSTP and what they do, and whether they have whether they have their own a robust IT department with a bunch of personnel that can deal with, supporting that infrastructure. We deal with a lot of smaller situations, building constructions, where the owner might just have a service provider for their IT or a consultant, so then when you have to coordinate the networking and then the potential addresses for that, I don't think they're going to understand it as well as somebody that already has an established IT group. I think as far as utilizing the OT, I think when it's a data-driven type environment, I think it's very important. I know Bedrock, they push a lot of data around with their data analytics, and then coming down the road is ASHRAE Guideline 36 for high performance sequence of operations. There's going to be a lot of information sharing between terminal unit controllers, systems controllers, plant controllers. So that data's got to move around in a fast way. So, and then also the controllers that are going to have all these pre-programmed sequences. There's a lot more points and objects that need to be passed around. So now you're moving a lot more data, and you don't if you're going to rely on an MST network, you're going to be reducing your device count on networks, probably more than 50% is what I heard. So,
So Bobbie, with you guys at the University of Kentucky, I know you and I have had conversations, excuse me, probably 4 years ago about IP devices and OT networks and all that good stuff. And when you hear Jeff talk about all the data sharing and some of the things that we know are coming when it comes to technology, smart buildings and all that good stuff, what type of pushback did you get or do you get when you talk about moving possibly from MSTP in certain instances to IP from your IT department? Or does that exist?
The biggest pushback that we get is that we can't daisy chain the IP devices, especially like VAV controllers.
Or as many, right? Yeah.
Well, they want a home run from each IP device back to the switch. Well, that's really expensive.
Expensive, yeah.
So then you have a project, and then the next thing that you know, you value engineered that out, right?
Right.
Because that's overkill
Right.
for what we're doing. But they want to see every device on the network and know what it's doing, and they will shut ports down for us. I mean, if they see something on the network that they think is unsecure, they'll close the port. So anytime that we try to daisy chain on them, or even insert a switch so that we can plug into a device that's already plugged into their network, they'll shut us down. Wow. So that insight they want to be able to see. So that's the biggest pushback that we've gotten from that. Now we do, all of our major systems in our buildings, we do IP devices. So every air handler, every hot water system, every chill water system, we're on IP systems.
And these are packaged controllers that come from the manufacturer, like the chiller plant controller, or?
No, not necessarily. I mean, we have some packaged units, but we do a lot of control work. Okay. Like we have a lot of JACEs running our air handlers.
That I do know, yeah.
But for the VAV network, it's MSTP. Just our fan coil units are what we call tier 2 devices are all MSTP.
And is that due to familiarity or the whole daisy chaining thing and the cost?
The biggest reason that we haven't moved is because of the IT department there. They won't allow us to move. And then when we can make a case to move, like, really if you have a smaller project, it's better to do MSTP. It's cheaper but we have a lot of new buildings going up that are huge buildings that it would be better to do the IP network. And
best in breed, future-proofing, the whole 9 yards, right?
They're just not going to allow it. So it's a hard no now.
So let me ask you this. I'm going to ask this question to you, Mitch, because you've dealt with customers like a Bedrock. And Russ, and I want you to kind of chime in and add a little color. You just heard what she said as far as dealing with her IT department. I saw your brain going, right? So explain to Bobbie some of the things that she may be able to counter her IT department with. And Paul, I see you shaking your head too. So why don't you guys maybe give her a few tidbits to take back with her, possibly, to arm her with some information, right?
Yeah, the first thing, which is unfortunate in your scenario, is not being able to daisy chain, right? That's an immediate cost and dramatic cost impact. The first thought I had was, are you familiar with T1L?
Yeah.
IP over serial. I don't know if that's a possibility, but it's really the education portion, right? I historically with customers, once we have the opportunity to sit down with them and explain to them what we're attempting to do with an OT implementation into their existing switches and infrastructure, once we can have an intelligent conversation with them, we can break those barriers down pretty well. It sounds like you're between a rock and two hard spots, right? But historically, if you can explain to them the network segmentation via software, and it doesn't have to be a hardware separation, start talking their language, it immediately their guard goes down. Oh, hey, these guys know what they're talking about. Let's have a discussion, a value proposition here of how we can save money, right? for an implementation, long-term support, and then use that as a business case to really be able to have these guys go back and take a second look at it, other than it's home runs, and if it's not home runs and not exactly what we want and how we want it, guess what? I'm shutting it down, right?
Right. So Mitch is a systems integrator, right?
Yeah.
Russ, you're his client. So Russ, you were the one who probably had those initial conversations with your IT group, right? Before you even brought Mitch on board. What do those conversations look like?
Yeah, so we started looking at IP back in 2017. We started designing the Hudson site book tower. And, we had those initial conversations too about home runs or daisy chain, and then having meetings with Scott and Distech and others. We found that hey, the daisy chain does work. So I'm blessed that we have our own operational Bedrock BMS that does just our operational technology, right? So we're able to do what we want. We have the bandwidth to do what we need here. But Bobbie's situation, being on someone else supporting her network, that's a tough one. If I had to do that, I don't know that we'd be in the same spot we are today. But yeah, so those initial conversations we had to design it out, see how it's going to work, look at the impact, because it is more expensive to do IP. Then I had to sell that up to leadership, hey, this is just a better way to do it because we have specific standards, we trend every input output on our controllers, whether it's a VEV controller, a chilled water plant controller tower. We bring all that. We bring all those historical trends into our cloud, and we store those indefinitely. We have trends going back to 2014 when we first launched our first Niagara system. So in order to aggregate all that data with what we're requiring, it required us to go to IP because MSTP, our networks were slowing down. We had JACEs running at a 96% CPU rate, which they were crashing and rebooting. So we had to resolve that, right? Because you're going to have a JACE just crashing all the time. So this is why we made the decision to go with this approach. The initial investment is more, but the long-term payoff is great for what we're doing.
Yeah, Paul?
So I want to reiterate some of the conversations earlier today, specifically Jim, right? Every organization faces this challenge. The problem is, as an operations team, you don't have the time to really dedicate your resources to really sit in those meetings with the IT networking teams, the solution architects, the cybersecurity teams, everybody involved with this decision making on IP and how you can do daisy chaining or so forth. Some people, they say no, and then after you have the conversations and test some things out, maybe in a lab and in a dev environment, you prove that it's not going to impact anything they're doing. You prove that it will function better. It's a better cost save to the business side. And then it starts to change people's decision making. We had this challenge at the Blue Oval, right? They said, you want to put an IP controller on our network? Oh, hell no. Well, we're doing it with the JACEs already. We're doing it with the DXDs. So what's the difference, right? So I think that's something what we see a lack of a lot of times is there's not somebody, you almost need that person that's some IT savvy and operation savvy in the middle that can sit in those meetings with the IT team and help drive the business case to get into all IP.
What do you say to that, Bobbie?
Well, I think that everyone needs to really know their customer, because at the University of Kentucky, we have that. Mm-hmm. My team is an IT team. We have less folks that know HVAC and more that know the networking behind it and the programming behind it than, the rest of the facilities management group. So I do sit in those meetings. I know the cybersecurity people very well. I know the IT people very well. For us, it is a daisy chaining thing. They will only do a home run. They will allow us to have it, but we have to do home runs, and that's a cost issue. So you have to know what your customer can spend. And we also, at the University of Kentucky, we write our standards. We don't allow consultants and engineers to come in and tell us what we need. We tell them what we're going to put in. Everyone thinks that they know what you need, but no one is working day to day at the university and understanding what the IT department's doing, other responsibilities that they have. So we do operations. We also do networking. We manage if there's a backnet issue on the network, they call us. They don't do anything with it. We're the ones that go out and run Wiresharks and show what's going on with the devices. So because our IT department, they don't understand the backnet side. They don't want to know. They just want to make sure that they're safe with what's going on. We've had cybersecurity attacks at our hospital. We had to tighten everything down. That came through a VPN access for a healthcare system. So there's a lot of different balls that they're juggling in the air. And for a big organization, you have to know what your departments are inside that organization, and you're right, you do have to plead your case, and you have to bring the knowledge to them and show them what it's going to be. But at the end of the day, if the funding's not there, and they don't have, for us at UK, they don't have to support, our IT people don't have to support that network. We'll do it. That's what my degree's in. That's what my staff, my controls engineers, they have the IT backgrounds. We'll do that. We're already doing it for our backnet instance numbers, for our MAC addresses, our devices that are on the IP network. So we're already doing that. But at the end of the day, if the network folks that are configuring the ports are going to shut us down because they think that something's slipping by in a daisy chain, we can't do anything with it. So when you go in to talk to your customers, you got to know who's running the show, who's running the network. A lot of times it's a shared responsibility, and you have to know that. You can't just go in and say, well, facilities doesn't know anything about networking, and that's why you need to talk to the IT people. No, that's not the case. There are facilities people out there that know what they're doing with the networks, but that is, at the end of the day, that is not going to fly with the ones that are also juggling healthcare systems and cybersecurity issues and all of that other stuff. It's low on the totem pole.
So I hear cost, right? I hear people keep on bringing, you guys have brought up cost a few times. So how does the initial cost and long-term operational costs differ between IP and MSTP? Who wants to take that one? Go ahead, Paul.
IP.
Because a lot of times you're going to have to build a business case, right?
Yes.
To try to sell
the
it to
IP
IT.
CapEx cost is initially more, not by a lot. Everybody says it's a lot. It's not. It's driven by what your network drops are, and what you pay per drop. The biggest cost difference.
Don't forget your configuration of switches, your labor-intensive stuff on the network. Don't forget about all of that stuff, because that's got to be included.
Same labor. I'll disagree with you, because you've got the same amount of labor pulling wire, whether it's serial and terminating each connection at each controller, as you do with running IP.
You do, but you have to configure the ports on the switch or it won't work.
Absolutely, and you still have to do that configuration anyway for other, it's not a lot of things. A lot of that stuff doesn't take a lot of time to do. So even if you do, price it per port, that's the initial thing. A lot of them.
When you say price per port, you're talking price per port that facilities is paying IT out of the operational budget.
Yes.
Okay, let's be clear.
So you have a couple costs. You have the configuration and cost for the network gear. Most companies, it's a monthly charge or they do annual charge. There's a cost in there. It depends who's paying for the cost, right? Is it the business owner that's paying the cost? Is it, if you're at a university and it's a special research lab, it might be coming from a different budget bucket. Or is it IT that's going to pay and manage that cost? Is there a cost in there? I've seen it all different ways.
So how do you, from a business perspective, justify IP, right, when we're talking ROI over MSTP?
It's the business owner, what their requirements are. If the business says, I want to see this amount of data, and it feeds into sustainability group, if they're looking at the energy side, if they're looking at a lot of data sets that they need for buildings, for research, pressurization, that's where the decision's made. Can I have a better solution here now? Because let's get real. IP controllers are newer in DDC, but they've been using PLCs since the 80s that have been IP. Why did they use PLCs? Because of the speed, the capability to do all this different functionality, write custom code in there, change things. So it's not a big difference anymore going to DDC now to what that is. Because if you go into like a manufacturing facility, I mean, Sid, you worked in a ton of those automotive facilities, everything's automated. And in the end, it's going to be automated. If you want to do AI and everything else, there's a change in the environment out there that is coming. And it's a lot of things that are making that change happen. People like my age are going to be leaving this industry in the next couple of years.
Yeah. So Russ, you guys had to put together some type of business case to go from MSTP to IP, right? So how did you guys justify from an initial cost perspective and talk about the long-term savings when you talk to IT, or were you guys just on the same page?
No, it was, we had to have the conversations, and we sat down with our, Jack Cicluna from our network and technology team. He also runs the IT team. And, at the time we standardized 16 port switches on the floor for our operational technology network. So what we had to do to accommodate for the BACnet IP devices was we upgraded to a 32-port switch, okay? So there was about a $300 cost difference in that. So that wasn't too big of a swallow for Bedrock, right? So we do an IT closet every other floor. Depending on the building, like Hudson site, there's 24, 25 of those. So, you had 300 out of that wasn't there. The cost of the cabling, it's hit or miss. I mean, it's a little more for the Cat 6, but again, for the amount of data that we are required to aggregate and store and display for our sustainability initiatives, for our energy consumptions. I mean, we're being accountable now for water usage, steam usage, electrical usage, natural gas. So we're analyzing and metering all of this stuff now. So in order for me to collect that data, accurately without having trends that are failing or historical data failing because we've had, network glitches because we're overloading the capacity of it, we had to upgrade. So it was just operational expenses, and we baked it into the building system. Jack took the share of the network switches and the technology side, my building automation side. We took the cabling on and the upgrading controllers.
So it was a relationship between yourself and Jack, between IT and facilities, or IT and OT, that allowed you guys to collaborate and sharing the expense.
And again, Bedrock hired us as content experts for this, right? So they trust us in what we're doing. But when you have operational technology within a building that does, so we're doing the network side, the building automation side. And to what Paul said, IP's been there forever. So we've had IP-based fire systems for forever. Lighting systems, right? All of our domestic water booster pumps have all been IP. Our electrical metering's been IP. This has been like this at Bedrock for years, so it's just one more thing we moved from MSTP or Modbus to IP. And if you give me a choice between Modbus and IP, I'm going to go IP all day.
Right. So we've got a question.
We had a couple of questions.
We got, yeah. So can we get the mic? Let's go here first. No, go ahead and take the mic. Yeah.
At your level, this is really interesting at all your levels, and I can see the difference between new construction and retrofit. How do you guys feel, let's say somebody would utilize Wi-Fi 6 mesh technology versus wired technology to alleviate some of the cost issues you guys are talking about? I'm seeing no's and yes.
I'll talk on that. So we do a lot of renovations, right? Our buildings are from 1900s to the 1950s, a majority of them. They're solid concrete walls, big steel columns and pillars. We've tried wireless technology. It does not work. So we cannot rely on it to work properly. So Bedrock and all of our redevelopments where we have to keep the historical aspects of the building, right? That's part of the Detroit Historical Society. So we have to keep in touch with that so we can do slight modifications of buildings where we can get wireless to work, let's say on a floor plate that's been opened up where we have wireless transmitting back to a VAV controller. We do in that application to save money on the hardware installation, right? But for other things like peer-to-peer wireless controllers, we've tried it, it doesn't work. So we're gonna stay hardwired on all redevelopments that are existing buildings.
We've got another question back there in the green shirt.
So I heard a few things up there that I wanted to ask questions about. You guys are talking about security first and foremost. Are you seeing any uptake in the requirement or the recommendation to use BACnet SC? And if so, have you deployed that on any of your sites?
I think it's useless. No, I'm gonna be completely honest with you, right? So I know a lot of people don't want me to say that, and I should probably be touting BACnet SC. I think it's more secure to use generic UDP ports that nobody knows what it is. You can't talk to it anyway, right? Because then you have a whole nother set of certificates you have to manage that go out of.
That's the big issue.
There's additional labor associated with that I have to pass along to Russ, for example. Whereas a simple conversation for me where you have, 88 different UDP ports you can try to pick from before you get into anything that I work on, right?
Yep.
And at that point, I know Jack's got it locked down to where they're not going to touch it. So
We've had this conversation. We've chose to go that that route.
Yeah.
Security by obscurity.
Yep. Oh, I'm stealing that.
No.
And honestly,
that's my
Mitch-
trademark.
Mitch made a really good point. It's always a challenge to, number one, get the certificates. If it's a company, a private certificate instead of going to an open certificate, that's a challenge. And then what happens? They expire. Do you have the support infrastructure to renew those certificates and manage those certificates? That's, again, another challenge. So I like, we talked about that, what you talked about. So,
I mean, then you got to find the right person that can troubleshoot why it's not, talking and everything else.
exactly.
And
I mean, some companies change port numbers. They don't use the traditional ports for that reason exactly, right? Because everything's on the internet, right? Admin passwords and I cannot believe in today's day and age that we still have issues with the default passwords being in.
you mean admin's not good?
Admin 1 2 3 4 5 6.
Exclamation if
So
you're fancy.
one more question. I'm not trying to bogart.
No, please.
How about IPv6? Has there been any uptake at all in that?
I haven't seen it.
Okay.
Got another question here. The gentleman here with his hand up.
It's more a rejoinder about the security by obscurity, which has been discussed in cybersecurity forums now for about 2 decades as being very, very bad, and essentially won't pass government muster, won't pass university muster, won't pass healthcare muster, it shouldn't pass anybody's muster.
Based on what?
Are we talking IP?
Yes. UDP port hiding, port knocking, any of those kinds of things. Essentially in government and healthcare, they'll send you out the door.
So I disagree on that. So we are building the University of Michigan Hospital Life Sciences Center here. It's a Bedrock property, and we're going to design it based on BACnet IP for critical infrastructure, MSTP for other things. We've passed that. Our two largest clients in our properties are Rocket Mortgage and Ally Bank. They're financial institutions, and obviously we have them on separate networks, but we have to, due to SEC regulations, we have to pen test our system quarterly, and they do deep dives in there, and we have passed every pen test, not had a failure at one point ever in our systems. We're locked down secure.
Yeah, I'm just curious on that. I think it's great discussion. So prior to BACnet SC and certificate management for BACnet token passing, what's the thought there? If there's no obscurity, you just go in at what it is, and then you're completely at the sole discretion of the owner's cyber.
Yes, but you have the issues of keeping essentially.
Sure. Well, so that goes a step further. That's a good point. I wanted to bring this up in my session earlier. Contractors in here? Raise hands. A bunch of contractors. How seriously do you guys take cybersecurity on your individual machines? It has to be paramount, right? So if you're connecting to an owner's network, whether it be through a scrub VPN, plugging into a switch, whatever the case may be, regardless of any protocols or things that are taken into account to try to mitigate breaches, if you're not being secure on your end as a contractor, it's kind of all for naught, right? So if I'm plugging into a chiller controller, right, and I have something malicious on my machine, How do I know that, right? So, I mean, it's end to end, right? That's why we call it point to point security. It has to be from the owner's buy-in throughout design, whatever that may be, right? All the way through the contractor installing it, right? So I had one other question, and I wanted to bring this up earlier from a cost perspective for the owner. Of the contractors here, how many people on staff have legitimate IT people working in the controls group for these kinds of things? 2? That's something we as contractors have to get better at, right? Because the cost in ROI discussion, to me, I simplify things, right? Keep it simple. It comes down to network connectivity dollars per device, right? So home runs are expensive, and Bobbie, that's a great point. Your point or port configuration, all those things. But if you're doing that, and that's on the owner's end, that should be not included in the TC contractor side, right? So there should be some relative offset of costs there that should be worked into the discussion with whoever's running your IT side, right? So it's not 100% just uptick in initial implementation costs, assuming that the specifying engineers laying things out appropriately and scopes are set up appropriately. Does that make sense?
So that kind of segues into my next question, right? So which technology, IP or serial, is easier to troubleshoot from a technology standpoint, right? Technicians, systems integrators, which one is easier to troubleshoot if you don't have an IT person on staff? Bobbie, I'll let Bobbie and Sid talk about this, and if you guys want to chime in, please do.
If you don't have an IT person on staff, then MSTP, because you just break the bus, right? And then you start adding back in. I mean, that's the simple hand tracing that we've all done. So, but we've troubleshot both at the university, and I mean, really, it's a wash between the network and the MSTP network, because you still have to trace down. If you're, and I don't know how all businesses run, but the university, every department in the university is their own little business. So they all have their own little bucket of money, and we can say, oh, it's all blue money, right? It's all UK money, but it's not. And so, like for us, we have to pay the IT department to put in a drop.
Per port, yeah.
Per port.
Yeah.
We have, if there's no ports, we have to pay for a switch, right? And then if for your security reasons, we may have virtual routing forwarding. We might have, we have to have our VPN access. We have our own VLAN for our devices, as opposed to the hospital email that goes back and forth, or where they may be sending x-rays. We can't have our traffic mixed with their traffic, and just your general staff. So there's a lot of configuration that has to be done on a switch once it's purchased. And switches are not inexpensive. I mean, they cost a lot. So, and for us, if we're going to put a home run for every device, that's a lot of switches, right, in a building. So, I mean, if you're troubleshooting the network and you're trying to figure out why this switch is jumping through this router, and maybe the ARP table is having an issue and you have to clear the ARP, or maybe the device is multicasting, or something like that, then that to us is just as hard as splitting the bus and having to trace hand over hand.
Right.
So,
how about you, Sid? From a troubleshooting standpoint, MSTP, IP, yeah. There you go.
From a troubleshooting standpoint, I mean, I think a lot of people don't even look at the quality of their MSTP buses, right? And they're actually a bunch of garbage. So, and it's just luck that they keep points online. You know what I mean? So,
Here.
I always love going into a building site that we're not involved with, because we actually take the time and scan those buses for collisions and all this stuff that you're supposed to do, and these resistors that appear or don't appear. You know what I mean? So
T-tap.
yeah, T-taps, you know, what's wrong with a couple T-taps every now and then, right? So
Pick it in.
I think that, you know, a lot of the MSTP stuff, I would guess more than 50% is really running pretty garbagey and causing a lot of bad play for it. I think that having an IT expert on my staff or multiple experts, which if you would have asked me 30 years ago when I started this company, would I have a whole gang of IT people talking stuff that I don't understand? I would say you're out of your mind. But if you don't have that person, and we work in a big automotive setting, and we literally have to go find their problems for them because, you know, the answer always back is that we're good and it's your issue. Well, no, you're maliciously scanning controllers for no reason at all and destroying them for us, right? So, you know, I think in the IP world, you've got to have an IT expert. And whether that's just a trusted individual that comes and works for you and carries that sword for you, that's one way to do it. In my case, I always like to have things under my roof, so I have those people. And there's a lot of times I'll take those people into conversations, especially about like the VAV issue. And it's like, you know, okay, everybody in this room, but, you know, him and him are going to stay here. We're all going to go out to lunch and you guys work out this issue and talk your little X's and O's till you're blue in the face. We'll be back in an hour and we need an answer, right? Because, you know, what I really learned, like in the big corporate IT stuff, it's a wear down game, right? Like probably some of the things I've been most credited for success in these projects is because I don't give up. So like you're going to have to do this eventually. So every week I'm going to ask for it. Eventually you're going to get sick and assign the right people. And then we're going to have an intelligent discussion. And then I'm going to leave the room and put my IT person in there. Let me know how it works out. And if I have to bring it up next week in my upper echelon meeting, right? So like, don't give up on anything because 5 years from now, it's going to be mandatory ways to do it probably. So you might as well get through the obstacles, but you just got to wear down on that stuff. But you can't, even as a person like myself, and I consider myself somewhat intelligent about IT stuff, if I didn't have somebody that really spoke that language and knew the, you know, like hacker level IT guy, right? We would never survive in this IT world. And it's just impossible. And I'm not saying that you couldn't put a couple VAVs in and make them work. You absolutely could. And you can have your own private networks, which makes it way easier, right? Because then you have your rules and you only have one intersection point with IT, right? So our one intersection point is going to be the fight, but behind it is a million things that you want to do any way you want to do, right? So hopefully that kind of answered it.
That's a very good answer.
Hey, just real quick, Sid, I want to shout out, bring Radio Shack back so we can get our resistors on without Amazon and overnight.
Right. Yeah, we miss Radio Shack.
Right.
So go right ahead, Mike.
Quick question. There are actually two parts. Have you tried feeding your IT people?
Yes,
They do like to eat.
they do.
Pre or post, yeah.
Okay, that's number one thing. Always worked with me, clearly. But, you know, one of the things I think we're going to start seeing software-defined local area networking. Right now, there's SD-WAN. You talked about IPv6. That's usually an outside protocol. That's an internet protocol because we started to run out of IP addresses on the inside space and we're using them on the outside too. But you're really going to start to see the adoption change when networking groups start building out secure enclaves. So that's something, I don't know if you've had that conversation with that cybersecurity group who's controlling that, but it sounds like that's part of the problem. And it's also the same thing with BACnet SC, right? So BACnet SC provides encrypted communication between endpoint devices. it's going to make troubleshooting a little hard, right? Because you can't really run a BACnet Pro scan or a packet capture between two devices that are encrypted. That'd be like me trying to capture you talking to your bank from your phone, to the internet. But with the more adoption of software-defined networking, you're going to be able to build these enclaves where, again, to your point, you can do whatever you want because it's a deny by default methodology where you are allowed to talk to him and he's allowed to talk to you, but only in French. Right? And only say the words that you need to be able to ask each other where the bathroom is. Like it's literally that granular, right? And I think that's when you're going to start to see the change. But the cost per point, right, per port needs to come down. That was pointed out in the last meeting with BXP. If you can drive the cost per port down, that's when that tipping point hits for you to be able to adopt that level of technology to say, yeah, we don't need serial anymore because it is more cost effective because I can now have the ROI from adopting IP.
Yeah, and that comes from collaboration with your IT department
yes.
and that trust and developing that relationship. So MSTP has long been the, let's say, reliable solution out there, right, between the two protocols, right, especially with legacy systems. Do you see IP catching up to that reliability? Has it caught up to that reliability?
About 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more reliable.
IP is more reliable.
Yeah.
To what you guys said earlier about MSTP, communication buses not being set up properly, we find that all the time here at Bedrock. So we have miles and miles of MSTP ran through our properties, and we'll find loose connections at the terminal blocks. We'll find somewhere that they've grounded the shield mid-bus and they shouldn't. That causes, and it's like they're troubleshooting nightmares. I mean, I've had to buy my team special tools to scan these buses to try to identify where it's at. We had one bus that took us almost 3 weeks to identify what was going on, and it was the shield was grounded in multiple different locations. Once we cleaned that all up, pulled some new cable, the thing's cleaned up, but it was a 3-week process, right? Whereas with IP for us, pretty much anybody in my team now can troubleshoot an IP network, and I have guys that aren't network people at all, but they've learned it really quickly. A couple boomers have even figured it out for us real fast. So, I mean, it's all about how it's set up, and being from that business area, being a contractor before, you can only oversee so much of what electricians are doing on your jobs, right? So you're not going through and checking out every part of the bus, or and to Mitch's point, it's very important when the control engineer is setting it up that they set up the ports right, the change of values, communications. There's a lot of work to it, and from work we've seen at Bedrock, it doesn't always happen.
And that's regardless of protocol.
Yeah.
100% regardless of protocol. That has to be, again, talking to contractors, contractor perspective, you have to implement a standard per protocol, a standard per size of implementation, and you have to segment data regardless of bus protocol and type. You have to. If you're not, you're doing a disservice, and it makes Bobbie's job harder when she's trying to sell things to her IT staff, right? So you have to do that.
Question back there.
I'm hearing a lot of talk about VAVs and potential IP runs to VAVs. Is there any concern from you guys in your various marketplaces that vendors who do make IP enabled VAVs, let's face it, that's the most cost sensitive controller in a building, right? And if I push up the cost of a VAV because now that Ethernet PHY cost me as a control manufacturer more money than the 485 transceiver. I mean, do you guys have any concern about that? Or are you seeing pushback from control manufacturers about that approach, putting IP on VAVs?
So there's a couple things. I'm sorry, I don't want to be a pain about it. I want to talk about serial. So MSTP is a backnet communication, okay? Obviously. What about LAN? What about Modbus? Serial connections, same problems. How many people in this room, the newer system integrators, put in LAN controllers?
Loved it.
Like I said, younger people.
How many put in Circon?
Yeah, you're funny. So the point is, number one, the knowledge base is leaving the workforce. It's no different in pneumatics. There's still 70% of the buildings still have some form of pneumatic control in there. When did that end? Who maintains the compressors on those systems? Who maintains all these networks and everything? I think both have positives and negatives. We can go through this all day. The bottom line is IP enables better transfer of data, better management practices of your devices down on that network. You're able to automate processes you may not be able to do on serial type of devices, right? Because you see what's going on, you can look at what firmware versions on the controller, you can update those processes automatically and manage those assets and generate reports. There's so much more horsepower and capacity on an IP controller. The quad processors on the newer ones, they break it out and dedicate the cores so it's not just sucking everything out like some of the previous things. Even Tritium did the same thing with their new JASES, right? The 9000s. They broke that up because they knew it was always a bottleneck. There was always heap memory problems. People keep on adding one more controller, serial controller to that until it breaks. So I think the biggest issue and what everybody in this room, one of the takeaways is IP is here. It's going to be moving forward. It's going to be passed down from the CISOs, the CTOs, all those different organizations that say, why aren't we doing IP? Why are you putting this in?
So you just mentioned CTOs, right? Chief Technology Officers. They're on the IT side, cyber side.
Yeah.
So which one of these do you think are less susceptible or more susceptible to cyber breaches? Which one is more secure? MSTP devices or IP devices?
MSTP or IP.
IP.
Yeah.
Are more secure?
Yeah. I could get a $30 router from one of Scott's, counters, walk into any one of these buildings, no one stops me. I can connect to that, take the chiller plant down, and all you gotta do is hit discover. Oh, someone named this chilled water system. Sweet. Right? Now I'm in there, add points, shut it down, walk away. Right? That's just
So IP is less secure.
more secure.
You're saying more secure.
Yeah, 100%. You can't get into the control. In an IP instance, you cannot access the controller without credentials. So in the scenario just talked about, I have to socially hack my way into a building, which does happen, right? B, I have to have credentials to get into the said controller if I know what port it's running on, right? I have to have some type of IP scheme to get on the network, right? So I have to know that, or I can try DHCP, and then to Bobbie's point, MAC address caching, port gets shut down, good luck anyway, right?
And to Mitch's point on that, when you're logged onto our IP network and you're trying to hack into a controller password, our security is going to catch that and it's going to lock down the port, and we're going to see that. Whereas on MSTP, we're not going to catch that because that's past the router, past the JASE level, right? So that's part of it that we're only secure as much as we can be there, right?
Yeah, so I tout myself as a behavioral scientist sometimes, and I'm looking at Bobbie's face. Do you beg to differ, Bobbie? Or
I think everybody's forgetting the human factor here.
Thank you.
You got to, in a perfect world, yes, it would be the more secure, and it would be the faster, and it would be the most cost effective, and you would get your return on your investment. But we don't live in that world because, you have to put other factors in place. I mean, who's gonna walk into a plant that has a secure security badge access, okay? And who's gonna I can get on any network and I can scan that network and find the IP devices on any of them. I don't know if you guys can do that or not. But you can download a tool online.
It's simple,
really
yeah.
easy.
I gotcha.
So it's a little bit. It's both have their strong points and their weak points. But if you've got all of your people who are managing your network and setting up your network on your MSTP side, doing it the right way, and managing that, which that's rare, if at all. But if you have that for you, then you're going to have a more secure MSTP network. But the IT people have to do the same thing too. I mean, our IT people ignore the alarms from their UPSs and the whole closet will go down. And now all of a sudden we're not passing outside air temp. Our air handlers think it's 0 degrees outside and it's 85. And so now we've gone into heating mode and we're burning our buildings up. So somebody has to be paying attention to what's going on in every little piece of the puzzle. Otherwise, none of it's going to work. And there's a human factor in that. And as far as your knowledge base walking out the door, At the university, the folks that have been there 50 years are holding us up from moving forward. You know, right now, we still have folks that have been there 45 years that think we should manually run our plants. Okay? Let's not worry about what the campus load is. I'm just going to go over here and turn this pump on or this pump off and forget about the hospital, right? Yeah. Because, you know, it's energy savings. We're going to turn this off and we're only going to run one pump, or we're not going to run our chillers during the winter because, you know, everybody's dampers work, right? We can utilize that free cooling because everybody's dampers work. Right. There's a human factor in there. In a perfect world, it would work and it would be wonderful and everybody would get along, but you have to look at every piece of it. You have to know your customer. That's the bottom line.
So let me ask this: with the convergence of IT and OT, right, and everyone running converged networks, does MSTP kind of run the risk of being obsolete when we're talking about smart buildings and moving forward, say 5-10 years? Do you see manufacturers just getting away from manufacturing new versions of MSTP devices within the next 5 years?
So let's start serial controllers again. LAN. They still have LAN controllers. The chips are no longer made. Echelon's gone, right? So I've talked to a lot of control vendors, and they basically said when those LAN controllers are depleted, LAN's gone. So that's the first thing, right? There's a ton of LAN out there. I mean, just because it had LAN communication protocol doesn't mean put LAN back in. That's the first problem. The biggest issue comes when directives change and the climate changes on the business side. How long are they going to produce? They're still making pneumatic control components. When are they going to stop doing that? It could be another 20, 30 years while they're still making serial controllers, or it could be, hey, there's a shift in the dynamic and say, we're going all IP. Mm-hmm. Things have changed. We see this is where we're going to get the biggest market share, and they're going to stop doing it. I mean, they're still building JACEs, right? Mm-hmm. Do I really need a JACE if I have a BACnet IP controller? I mean, sorry, Tritium, but why do I need a JACE? Just route something through a JACE?
Scott, do you want the mic?
Toss it to him.
Bring the mic back up here, Scott.
So I will just say,
defend us here.
With the new networking schema, right, where it's port to port, you're talking to a server, you're talking to the controller. It's not going to route anywhere else. If it does,
again, yeah, here. Hold on. Let me give him the mic.
There you go.
Okay,
Painting his forehead about the bust.
Yeah, so I guess the elephant in the room, which we haven't really addressed yet, which is, you know, the use of Niagara right now, the JACE, as a gateway onto IP networks. We've been using it forever, the serial gateway, if you may, of choice. We have best product on earth for it. Yeah. And we know Niagara is going to keep JACEs around for a long time, so we can continue to bring those serial networks up to IP. Mm-hmm. So going back to the conversation about IP versus serial, you know, when you have JACEs already taking serial data, managing the devices, turning it into IP data, cyber securing it for you, encrypting it for you, adding cybersecurity policies over time through your SMA, which you all subscribe to. Thank you for that. Is that not the best way still to do it? Because I'm getting the low-cost MSTP, I'm getting the cybersecurity, I'm meeting the IP requirements.
The networks are still in place.
The networks are still in place. So I'm just wondering, like, and that to me is still and Jeff, would you agree that is the most typical design today?
Yes, it is. And that's what I was saying. It's more of the hybrid is potentially in the near future of making the HU system controllers IP and plant controllers IP and keeping the smaller stuff MSTP. But again, I think there'll be a shift at some point when we're pushing more data around for this guideline 36.
And that's kind of my question. And, you know, and that's really what is next, right? If we're not using Niagara, you know, kind of, and I know the obscurity thing is one way, but really, and you guys poo-pooed BACnet SC hard, right? That's ASHRAE's attempt. They got some really smart people working on that. That's like their best try, if you may, right? And obviously the manufacturers, many of them in the room, they're not real excited about it like you guys either. So you know, it clearly adds some complexity to their lives. I'm sure you can imagine. But so I ask you, you know, the panel, like, what is going to be the architecture of the future? Are we, you know, how will we go all IP, right? If we're not like with a BACnet SC or something of that nature.
So the Hudson's Tower is a prime example. That's a $2 billion development that is Niagara based with a cloud hosted supervisor, but we have no JACEs in that building. So we're bringing everything in through Distech IP for our plant controllers. Anything that's on MSTP, we're using a KMC router and we're pulling it back that way into our network, pulling it all to the cloud. So that's an entire development, $2 billion that we're not one JACE on the property.
So I think
there will not be one.
There's two parts to your question, though, or at least I perceive two parts. Question one, security, right? And there's several ways that, in your instance, Russ, Bedrock's tackled that, right? So from a contracting perspective, it's easy for me to sit here and say this is what we're going to do because I have their horsepower behind us, making sure we're secure, right? So that's delineation one. That's a great point. Delineation two is Russ going that route. You're relying on the contractor, whoever that may be, to configure a system that has to essentially run without the cloud-based supervisor when that happens.
Yep.
Right. So that's as contractors, we have to be cognizant of that, right? So we're not talking typical implementation, pull everything into a JACE, make all the magic happen in the JACE, right? Or supervisor. We, you know, in the instance of the things we're working on, Hudson being one of them, we have to take into account, okay, if I have zero network connectivity, how do we still maintain all these operations of all these intricate sequences that we're trying to do to keep these people comfortable, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a larger discussion of, and I think a lot of this goes back to we can sit up here, everybody can go around, we can fly around the country and say IP is the way to go. Mm-hmm. But until I can ask a question to the crowd and say, how many contractors do we have in here? How many contractors have IT staff like Sid on, or an IT professional on staff that can help lay these things out? And then the third question is, quite frankly, when you don't have that network connectivity, how are we going to maintain functionality until every single contractor keeps his hand up? Serial's not going away. Yeah, it's just not.
Right. So that kind of segues into my question that I want to ask for each one of you, right? I want each one of you to answer this question. What advice would you give a building owner when they're considering or making a decision between a full deployment of MSTP or IP, serial or IP? Start with you.
I think that comes down to the cost proposition, right? So in a perfect world, you're gonna have a bit of both. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody's established up here that large plants, large systems, air handlers, chillers, critical environments, you're going to want to be IP for a myriad of reasons we've all talked about. The proposition comes in, how do we, as cheaply as possible, control said space, right, individual space, to maintain the most reasonable amount of comfort for the lowest implementation value.
With reliability.
With reliability, right? So a lot of that's going to be the Viconics thermostats, the MSTP-based pre-canned applications that you can throw in for a couple $100. I don't have to have a custom program. There's a lot of things that go along with it, right? In that instance, you're still going to have some backbone to get you to whatever environment you're going to, right? So you still have to have, in my opinion, both today as a way to successfully implement as the lowest cost value to the owner for implementation. Mm-hmm. In 5 years, it may be a little different, but again, I think as much as we want the industry to change, until the industry catches up and adopts, it's what it is.
Yeah. How about you, Russ? I know you guys have done it, so.
Yeah, I agree with Mitch on that. So, and I'll say this, but don't hold me to it, but I go both ways on this, right? So we do the IP-based controllers, but we also do MSTP, and there's a reason for that, right? So I can't go all IP throughout my building for like unit heaters and fan coil units, just the small devices that don't need it. That's where we'll go with a BACnet MSTP, controller or a Viconics stat or whatever, and that's where we'll come out of a router to it because it just makes sense financially. So it's part of your design and implementation, your strategy, your smart building strategy, and how you're going to do it. And we sat down for the Book Tower and the Hudson site specifically to try this new approach. And we designed this with with Niagara Tritium. I sat down with James Johnson and George Keller and these other guys, and we gave them our hesitations with the Jace controller. And not that we're opposed to it. I love the Jace. I'm always going to love the Jace. It's always going to have a purpose at Bedrock. Smaller developments, we're putting the Jace, and we're not going to the cloud. We're still using the Jace. But for these large buildings, we had to look at be financially responsible for our company, right? And look at, do we want to have, for example, Hudson said would have probably had 120 Jaces. Do I want 120 Jaces with SMAs that have to renew every 5 years, where I have to update these Jace controllers on revisions every couple months or whatever it may be? It's time-consuming tasking for my team. So we sat down with these guys, and this is where we came up with the cloud-hosted supervisor. You can bring the MSTP devices in this way. You can do that. So they were a big part of where we're at. So I'm not knocking Tritium or Jaces. They have a purpose, and they always will. Like, I agree with you, Scott. I think a Jace will be here forever. I think it's going to evolve into something even bigger and better. But yeah, I would say you can do both financially responsibly and have an amazing running system.
Well, and in your case, you took advantage of, you looked at the costs of both, and you went with the most cost effective with as much IP as you could put in.
Correct. And the savings we made on not having the Jace hardware, the control panels, the SMAs, that covered the difference we had in IP controllers and still gave us like a 30% decrease in budget.
Love that. So Paul, what advice would you give an owner?
So I think it depends on the client, quite honestly. I mean, are we looking for a budget-friendly environment to put something in to have visibility into your building? Yes, MSTP, serial, and IP to get you, to your web browser and manage what you have. I think there's a lot of buildings, it could be overkill. But you just had the building of the future you designed. And a lot of those things, that you look at, and you look at the data sets that what we would have put in when I was out in the field, we're putting probably 100% more points on that compared to what we did then. Because now you're feeding in sustainability groups, you're getting other energy metrics that we didn't have before. Sid, working with all the different groups, in a big manufacturing facility, everybody has their agenda and the data sets they want to have. And in the beginning, I think where the value proposition is, they had their own little things they put on a network and try to do it. And they said, oh, gee, we didn't realize you could do this and aggregate it into one platform. And we can offload that data for long-term storage. I did this, 10 years ago for that manufacturing? And quite honestly, everything in our industry is going to be what we decide we want to do as system integrators, owners, designers. We're going to be the ones that are going to push the manufacturers to change. Right. Because when we start saying, I'm buying IP controllers and I'll pay a little extra for an IP controller just because it's easy for me to manage that asset and have visibility to that asset, and I don't have all the extra licensing costs that I need because I don't have to be in a serial connection anymore, I'm going to go that thing. And darn well, it's all dollars and cents real easily. If it's a big H or big S or whoever it may be, it doesn't matter. It's profitability. And when you stop selling product, they're going to stop building it. And we see this even on my bigger concern, quite honestly, one more output, is with technology, there's a cost to that too. Things evolve in 5-year life cycles. IT does a 5-year cycle plan. Some people just lease their network gear because they refresh it every 5 years because you get newer and greater stuff. You have better security management on there. It's going to possibly be the same way in our industry. Eventually, but it is. I mean, it's already going. We talked all morning about cloud, right? Right. Cloud's going to have a cost. It's a service. Code Labs, they provide a service. They give you a platform that does X, Y, and Z. It costs so much to implement, then it's an annual cost. The biggest thing that's going to be our challenge is the organizations have not changed yet to fund that OpEx budget. Right. CapEx, I can get dollars. I can do the licensing for 5 years on the software, but once that's done, now I got to find a source to relicense that. So I think it's a dynamic change that slowly will get there, but like we talked about, it's the resistance of the 40, 50 60-year-old people that said, I've done it this way for 30 years or 40 years or 50 years. I know what valve to open up manually, and I know which one to shut off. We see it everywhere.
Yep.
So it's not even a building automation system, right? So I think that's where the change is. And as time progresses and we have the attrition of people leaving and new people coming in, you're going to have a huge knowledge gap. Because all the guys that knew all the tricks on the MSTP networks and the LAN networks and the Modbus RTU networks, they're going to be gone.
They just think they knew the tricks.
Well,
Right.
Well, that's just hours of being up in the ceiling trying to figure out where the network screwed up.
All right, so Sid, give me a couple.
Okay, refresh
Yep.
the question. To me,
Yeah.
because-
You're walking into a new client, another industrial client, and what would be your advice? MSTP, IP, hybrid, would be your advice to your customer?
I mean, the advice is always going to be hybrid, right? So, again, your client's a big thing. If you're dealing with a global reaching client like I do, I've got to reside on their network because I'm not building anything else, right? I'm fighting for my own BMS VLAN,
Right.
which I probably got 2 more years of fighting for, right? But when you get into a K-12 situation, that's a much smaller institution that, the IT is going to be 2 different ways, either super professional or could be a pretty ragtag there. So you're going to have to try to fight again for that isolated network for yourself, not only for yourself, so you don't have to deal with all the stuff that goes on in those buildings, right? And then you talk about cities and municipalities, sometimes even, mid-sized cities, IT infrastructure's very disappointing to see, right? So you've got to work that one through and convince that there. And then you get into university stuff where universities, especially when they're a leading university, I mean, that's a whole different level there too, right? So because there's a lot of government stuff mixed in with it and they got to take it to the next level. So the answer is simply, you're going to use both, right? And then if you're coming out of the ground new, you've got to look at that customer and hopefully lead them and be in that early design or have a design professional pushing for the future and all the data that's coming from it. When you're trying to retrofit a building and you're on tight budgets, you got to stick to your budgets and stick with the technology that's going to give them the data that they need, right? And it's all data driven now.
Yep.
Like I love this industry now because people, and I'm just like, pull the records, print the charts, email it to me. It is what it is, so it's, data driving and like all this cloud stuff and, it's neat and cute and stuff like that. But ultimately it's all about data, right? And how you use your data.
Data will
right?
tell the story.
You don't have to go to the cloud to use your data. It's your data. Make sure it's your data. And, whether you're going to do MSTP or IP, your IT department's going to help you decide on a lot of that stuff. But have a professional IT person representing you in those initial fights, even if you have to hire a company to come in, because you stand no chance, because it's just easy for them to say no. And that's the end of the story, but it really isn't, right? And you just got to keep rubbing them down until you get what you want out of them, because there is a way to do everything and stay in the rules. But it's going to be a long conversation. Like I said, I mean, my conversation for being able to see tritium on a cell phone at a big 3 place was 4 years. But you know what? I found out that IT was doing it for themselves, managing their switches. And then the conversation got a little bit rougher on it. Like, I hear you're doing this. Why can't I?
Why can't I? All right.
Right? If this is so bad, why are you getting to do it? Right? So, I mean, it's just grind, and get what you need out of it too. Right?
So Bobbie.
I'm sorry, I had one quick thing. I want you hit on it's super important, and I apologize, Greg.
No, go ahead.
You said something about owning your data and not leasing it. Make sure you own your data. That's super important. So make sure where your data is going, it's your data, and not something you're leasing from a third party.
Yeah. So Bobbie, let's say we are in this alternate universe where you leave UK and you go to the University of Louisville, and now you're running their facilities.
I believe we made it.
Still going to be a hybrid.
So what is going to be your recommendation?
It's going to be the same one that I have at UK. It's going to be, we need an
You're
architect.
not going to sabotage them?
No. We have to have an architecture, and I love Jace's. Vicon Jace's are my favorite.
Yeah.
They are, for me, the only truly open platform that a Jace has. So it's always going to be a hybrid for us.
Mm-hmm.
We're always going to have a hybrid. The folks you need a group of folks that are going to maintain even a hybrid architecture.
Yep.
Because, no offense to contractors, but every job we have, they come in and they use 47808 and Network 1, right? that makes for a very
No one told us any different.
Right.
Stick
They turn
with your
routing on
default.
too.
Yeah, for sure.
And everybody has, you're right, everybody has their default passwords that they use. So, our team has to go back behind those people, and we have to make them use what we assign them. We have to change passwords and make sure things are secure. But it's always going to be a mix for us.
Mm-hmm. So Jeff, you get the last word.
All right, well,
What are you going to recommend to your clients?
as we started at the beginning, it's really dependent on the size of the projects, the entity, and then the strength of the IT group that's supporting it. I think, again, initial cost for project is a factor. Construction managers are constantly trying to drive the cost down. Owners don't want to pay as much. So you can see, that in a competitive world, contractors are going to try to provide a solution that they can, that they can win the project. And so then, hold on. So then, so in our projects for some of these smaller projects, K through 12, government entities and stuff, it turns into like a turnkey installation that falls on the temperature controls contractor, and they're limited to their experience. There might be a facilities group that really wants to go down this path of OT, smaller groups, and IT's not totally on board, but the TC contractor, they can build a separate backbone, use an Optigo or contemporary controls, and then they can manage the switches and, kind of get that flavor of the OT. But again, when it comes down to service in the future, not all companies might be familiar with that. So I think it's a mixed bag where it can go. And again, with cost being a factor, I mentioned guideline 36, but just recently, ASHRAE 90.1, there's the new code requirements of having controlled receptacles and sub-metering and getting a third-party commissioning agent on board now when buildings over 10,000 square feet. There's going to be a lot more costs into these projects. So then they're going to look for ways to try to trim the budgets, and there's going to be some value engineering. So I mean, that could drive what the end solution is. So again, I think there's pros and cons to the IP and MSTP being hybrid. So.
Outstanding. So rapid fire. Last question, one word answer. Where do you think this industry is going to be if you had to bet within the next 5 to 10 years? MSTP, IP, hybrid, or something different? Mitch?
IP, 10 years IP.
Russ?
5 years, still hybrid.
Paul?
5 years hybrid.
Yeah, 5 years hybrid, probably N2 still around.
Nice one, Sid. Nice.
Bobbie?
Ours is going to be hybrid.
I go with the hybrid.
Hybrid. With that said, we're 1 minute and 42 seconds, which is a lot less than my last 2 sessions. We're only 1 minute and 48 seconds over. So with that, I'd like to thank all of our panelists. Let's give them a hand. Thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. There were no real arguments. just friendly banter and friendly debate. So I really appreciate you guys. And I appreciate the audience. Thank you guys for showing up to our last session of the day and sitting through. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll see you at ControlsCon tomorrow. All right. Yep. Thank you.